Hello, hello. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the first day of the NIL Conference 2015. We're excited about that. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing the man of the hour, Propaganda. Yeah. My fellow NIL Conference committee members thought it would be a cool idea if I introduced him in the form of a rap. And I thought it was a dope idea, so that's what I'm going to do. So here we go. Yeah. All right. About to introduce the homie Propaganda, and when he comes up to the stage, everybody stand up. But first, let me tell you all some things about this man, cause there's a few facts that you all should be aware of. Grew up on the West Coast, California raised him. Got Los Angeles flowing all throughout his veins, and clever with the way he moved throughout the English language. You could say spoken word is how he got famous, but also he's a rapper, poet, and academic, and an activist fighting problems that's systemic. He's on the record label, they call it Humble Beast, and if you go up on their site, you can cop their songs for free. And he's a husband and a father, a dope graffiti artist, and truly one of my favorites in this hip hop genre. So please give a warm Scots welcome to the one and only fella named Propaganda.
Am I on this?
You couldn't have man. You couldn't have warned me. I could have had the Periscope on deck, you know what I'm saying? I didn't even know that was, I could have had the Snapchat, you know? Dang, man, ain't nobody ever rapped my life but me. It's incredible, man. Dog, man. Man, make some noise. You see me try to drink the mic just now? Did you see that? Those are great. Can you guys please, can you just stand up real quick? Come on. Yes, on the stage. Just go and show them the sock game right now. Sock game is strong. I love it. There it is. Yeah, well, you just cut out like 10 to 15 minutes of what I was going to talk about first by just explaining it all already. But either way, we just going to go in. You guys good, man? Okay. So tell me what years, how many first year students we got in the building? How many first year students? You can always tell the first year students because they raise their hands. You're not in high school no more. It's okay. You're not in high school. You don't have to raise your hands. Word up. How many second year, first year students we got? You know what I'm talking about? How many super freshmen we got in the building? I feel you. I was a super freshman. There's no shame in that, right? Second year students, any second year? Word up. Third year students. How many of y'all up out of here this year? You know what I'm saying? How many of y'all was supposed to be up out of here this year but got a job, so can't be up out of here yet? How many of y'all, we got super seniors in the building? We ain't got no super seniors? Dang, you guys are much better students than I was. I used to always judge the people that got out in 4 years, because I was like, that means your mama must pay for all your bills. You ain't got no doggone job. You was able to take 21 units and carrying on. You cheating, man. I don't want to hear nothing you got to say. You know what I'm saying? Why you ain't taking night classes? Because I got to work. The job. Anyway, so it's dope. It's good to know y'all here on the count of three. Everybody tell me your names. 1, 2, 3. Word, I know you all. Now we're BFFs. Anyway. Super honored to be here. Like he said, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I kind of grew up in a predominantly Latino neighborhood. ¿Dónde está mi gente? Aplauso fuerte. There's not many of y'all out here, apparently. Yeah, so I grew up in that type of neighborhood. My parents became believers when I was in elementary school. We just kind of found a church in a phone book. You guys can Google a phone book. You can see what those were. So we just found it. It was close, and we went. We didn't know good theology from bad theology. We knew that Jesus was Lord, and we should go somewhere on Sundays. That's what we knew. And so we went, and by God's providence and His grace, we landed in an incredible church. I heard the gospel in Sunday school, and somewhere between maybe 6th grade and 8th grade, somewhere in there, the Lord saved me. I wasn't like, even though I grew up in LA, it was one time I did this event once. It was a long time ago. This old white lady, got to put that in there because that's what makes the story make sense. So a white lady goes, "So before you were a Christian, were you a Crip or a Blood?" Those were my only options. I grew up with Mexicans, so I got chased by Crips and Bloods. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. It depended on the day. I guess Thursdays I was a Crip. Anyway, So in that time, even though we grew up in there, I don't have that story where I was like, man, I was in gangs, I was hooked on all kinds of cocaine and selling weed. I don't have that story. You know what I'm saying? Like, I remember I tried gangbanging maybe for like a week, right? And it was like, and it's like when you from LA, it's hard to not be affiliated, but it's real easy to not actually join a set. Because I'm like, we have to like actually fight. Like, you got to get jumped in for that. And I don't like pain. So I'm like, I'm just gonna let you beat me up. You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous, right? But I remember, you know what I'm saying, you trying to be cool with all the other kids, you know what I'm saying? Like, I go visit my grandmother used to babysit us, so we stay with my grandmother, and you try to go play with the little boys across the street that grandma said you ain't allowed to play with, because they were Crips, right? So you weren't allowed to play with them, but I wanted to be cool, and I remember like we outside, trying to be cool with with the big boys, and then like the bigger boys came and was like, all right, fellas, time to go to work. I was like, wait, what do they mean by that? What do you mean by time to go to work? Oh, word? Yeah, I gotta go check out with my grandma. I was like, Grandma! Anyway, so I never really gangbanged. That wasn't my thing, but I fell in love with hip-hop around that time because I found gangbanging just not so interesting to me. It's just a life I didn't like, I wasn't interested in. But hip-hop for me, like when you live close enough, where I live close enough to Venice Beach and to the LA River, so you seeing people spinning on their heads and pop locking, and people, we had murals like, y'all familiar? Have y'all ever seen the LA River? It's not really a river, right? Like it's concrete. Like it's just this rainstorm thing. It's just ginormous. And the sides of the walls are probably as size as this. And it would be these graffiti artists would just paint these murals just all over. And I just remember driving into the city and just being just so mesmerized by that and being like, whatever that is, I want to be a part of that. My sister's 6 years older than me. When she had a slumber party once, right? And I think it was her 15th birthday or something like that. And they rented a movie, her and the other friends. And we lived in the hood, so like, you can have a slumber party in the kitchen or in the living room, and you can see the TV from every place in the house. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting in the kitchen and I'm watching the movie that they rented with all her little girlfriends and such. And it was a movie called Beach Street. Now, Beach Street starred this breaking group from New York called the Rocksteady Crew. Now, this is like the early mid '80s. LA didn't know anything about breakdancing. Like, that was New York stuff, right? We didn't know anything about like jackets because it was never cold, right? Like boots and like just the big bubble jackets. I didn't know nothing about that, but. Nor did, and to be honest, again, because I'm from LA, I thought all Latinos were Mexicans. I had never met a Puerto Rican, right? And I'm like, they kind of black, like they look, right? But anyway, so the Rocksteady Crew had a lot of Puerto Ricans in it. So I was watching it, and there was a scene, right, in a subway. And again, I'm from LA, I never seen a subway, so I'm like, they were about to battle. They were gonna, what you guys would call a dance off. To battle, right? So they was about to battle, and the dude was like, The dude was like, hey, you biters, oh, you boys are biters, right? Biter means he copies somebody's styles, if you didn't know that, right? So, and he goes, you just mad your moves ain't worth spit. And then he's like, what's up with that, punk? He hit the B-boy stance. I was done. I was like, I want to be that. Whatever that is, I want to be that. So, again, providentially, by the Lord's grace, hip-hop pulled me away from a lot of the shortfalls and pitfalls that people from my city was falling into. We just happened to go to a church where our pastor was just, I guess he was forward thinking. We had some pretty legendary graffiti writers at our church, and at the time this was not normal, you know what I'm saying? And he would just every 6 months he'd let them paint our walls in the back and stuff like that. So I saw that it was possible to be a believer and exist in this culture, you know what I'm saying? So and at the time, you gotta remember, we didn't have Christian radio stations. There was no such thing as K-Love or none of that. So I didn't know Christian music was like the Winans. It was like choirs, you know what I'm saying? I didn't know anything about, I was like, y'all have concerts? I didn't know anything about that. So I didn't know there were any other rappers anywhere else on the planet, right? I just didn't know, you know what I mean? So either way, so that trajectory ultimately landed me to where I am now. My father was involved in the civil rights movement, and the time of the hip hop that I fell in love with was very involved in systemic injustices and changing and protests and things like that, and stopping the violence and things like this. So this is the hip hop I fell in love with, right? And so it made sense as a believer. It just made sense that it was okay to participate in this, you know what I'm saying? And then, education was important to me. I ended up going to school for illustration and intercultural studies, and I got a master's in education. I taught high school for a while. I taught for 6 years, and helped write some charters. Once upon a time, I was a youth pastor, because if you love Jesus and you go to a church and you're young, at some point, your pastor's going to put you in. You know what I'm saying? You guys all have to be the youth pastor at some point, right? You know what I mean? And so I kind of had that, and I was like, I really had no business being their youth leader. You know what I'm saying? It's I don't know, turn Ephesians, right? But I knew I loved the scriptures, and I knew I loved what the Lord was doing in our lives, and I knew I cared about the kids. That's all I knew. But either way, all that landing me to this stage. Make sense? Good. So I've been recently chewing on Ephesians chapter 5, verse 8, and especially in light of some of the stuff that's been happening. I heard you guys have been talking a little bit about race these days, right, around these parts, and I don't know how you couldn't, you know what I'm saying, unless none of you own the interwebs, right? But it's an important thing. I think it's a really interesting season in our country and in the world, no less. And as somebody that was social science teacher, and somebody I'm a sociology nerd. I read scholarly journals on planes just because I'm a nerd, right? And just the cycles of history I find very interesting, right? And I find as a father, with my father that was a part of the civil rights movement, I find myself asking a lot of the same questions he asked, right? And I don't have necessarily the greatest relationship with my dad, but this season has really helped me talk to him a little more, to really trying to put a finger on how I felt and how I feel. I think we're in an interesting place as a church. And the opportunity I think the Father has laid in front of us, I think is an opportunity that doesn't come very often. I think this is a chance for us as believers to really shine in a way that I think we may have missed here and there before. Now, when you talk about race, you talk about race in Los Angeles, it's considerably different than talking about race in Georgia. I'm gonna let that sit for a second. Talking about slavery, so my connection with with racism might be a little different than some of y'all. Now I understand that not all of y'all are from here. You guys are all from different parts of the country, possibly parts of the world. So I know that like the discussion may look a little different kind of based on where you are from, right? But I think there are some things that we can point at that are like, yo, I don't care where you from, this is pretty much true. Y'all feel me? You sure? You guys are so like nice, and this is awesome. You're in a great age group right now too. And I think this is the age group to really talk about this, because I think once you hit college and then you start getting to the middle of college, you have what I like to call the death of idealism, right? Idealism kind of dies around here. You feel me? Because life ain't as easy and as simple as your high school youth leader tried to tell you it was, right? It's not that simple, right? And the people you was taught to avoid, all of a sudden you actually share a room with, right? And they're really not as bad as you said they were. You know what I'm saying? Right? You know, it was, for me, there was a time I thought when I was in, you know, in the junior high ministry that Jesus would, if I ever accidentally touched a girl's booty, he was going to rip the sky open, you know what I'm saying, and strike me with lightning, you know what I mean? Like you was going to be dead on the spot, and that God could never use you ever, right? You know what I'm saying? There was a time that I kind of felt like if I slipped in these particular, because it was just this ideal, because Christians don't do this and they do that, right? So around here, you around this time, you find that like some of that stuff was like, yo, man, I think you was actually kind of passing to me just, that was just kind of a culturalization right there. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that was good doctrine, right? You guys are now that you're in college, you probably ask the same thing, like, you know, I'm not sure how theologically sound my pastor was, right? You know what I'm saying? You kind of having those moments right now. So you having this kind of death of this idealism. And what happens specifically in this age, because y'all got that youthful zeal, right, is when your idealism kind of dies, all of a sudden all of y'all become revolutionaries. So you think about dropping out of college and moving to Zambia, right? So you can start planting, so you can start digging wells, right? You won't change the world, right? You know what I'm saying? Everybody think about being missionaries. Now all of a sudden you got the answers to all society. I know I felt like this. I took 2 political science classes. I don't know why the president ain't calling me. I tell you exactly what to do in the Middle East. That's what's happening right now. All of a sudden, y'all got answers to everything, right? Because your idealism died, and now you know. You know what? This is what my parents did wrong. This is what the government doesn't understand. This is what the church needs. Pack your bags, move to Guatemala, open an orphanage. That's being radical for Jesus, right? So that's kind of like the pendulum swing that kind of happens right now. This is my favorite moment, because this is that awkward laugh, right? That like, no. You ain't lying to me, because I know, right? So this is a good season to kind of really talk about some things and kind of get that good energy, that good desire to see the world change, and kind of put it in some pretty healthy parameters, so you just don't, you know what I'm saying, waste your scholarships and your tuition money, you know what I'm saying, thinking that. And then the crash happens when you realize, when you sold all of your things, right, and you moved to Calcutta, that the world didn't change, right? And they still hungry, people still dying, right? You know what I'm saying? And then you start getting delusioned, right, or disillusioned, and now you're questioning your whole foundations of faith and all these different things. But it's an interesting moment we're in, right? And I think that God has a beautiful way of preparing us for this time and giving people that's kind of been living a little longer than you, giving them to your life so they could say things like they used to say to me. Let me tell you what the old folks used to say to me. They used to say, keep on living. And I would be like, what? My auntie used to say that all the time. She'd be like, okay, keep on living. I'm like, look, I got 4 cousins in jail, okay? I'm the one trying to do good stuff, right? You just gonna talk to me that way? You just talk to me that way? I'm trying to change the world. Keep on living. Anyway, I remember being maybe a freshman in high school. I remember waking up and looking out the window, and I remember the city was on fire. It was. I think it's the best way to explain it, and that's not like a metaphor. Like buildings were burning, right? And it was the morning of the LA riots, right? And being like kind of like a preteen, man, maybe I was in high school, I don't remember, but whatever time that was, it was at a time for which you really can't put words to your emotions, right? You kind of really can't, you just kind of can't explain how you feel right now, right? And to back y'all up a little bit, so there was a man, his name was Rodney King, and he was driving home one night late. He was pulled over for speeding. He was pulled out of his car. He was beat by 4 police officers pretty bad. It was filmed, and at the time, that was kind of brand new because all of our phones didn't have cameras on them then. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of like the fact that it was caught on tape was kind of revolutionary. You know what I'm saying? So he was filmed. City was outraged. These officers were arrested. They were brought to trial. They faced a trial, and then they were acquitted of all charges, right? And city just kind of lost their mind, right? Just really not understanding how this was possible. And the feeling was one of these feelings to where it's like, how many of y'all got little brothers, little sisters, right? Now, you know they crazy. You know your mama gave birth to Beelzebub, right? But your mama don't believe it, right? And you ain't never got no evidence about that until one day she actually saw this little demon child acting like a demon. And you like, look, see, I told you she crazy. I've been trying to tell you this whole time. This child is crazy, right? Now, I'm from the inner city. I grew up during the war on drugs and the crack attack and the DARE program that some of y'all may not know about, the stop and frisk laws, the 18-to-1 ratio. Let me tell you the 18-to-1 ratio if y'all don't know about this. 18-to-1 ratio is this, is that 1 ounce of crack, if you caught with 1 ounce of crack, you get the same amount of jail time as 18 ounces of cocaine. 1 ounce of crack, you get the same amount. So you got to have 18 ounces of cocaine to get the same amount of jail time you would get in 1 ounce of crack. Now, why that's special, why I bring that up is because cocaine is a wealthy drug, right? Cocaine is a cocaine is a wealthy drug. Crack is a poor man's drug, and crack was in black and brown communities. So you telling me the rich kids, you need 18 more ounces, right? To get the same amount of jail time I'm gonna get is 1. This was an unfair law. Does that make sense? Right? So I'm living in this time, right? So as far as I'm concerned, when you from a disenfranchised people group, the idea of the police kind of overstepping their bounds, that wasn't new, right? That happened all the time. So the idea that Rodney King got beat pretty bad, that's not news, right? They get beat all the time. You know what I'm saying? That's not news to us. And my father was a probation officer. My brother to this day is a highway patrolman. We got officers in our family. There's no like disrespect of law enforcement, but there's an understanding that we live in this city. The police beat us. That's just what they do, right? Why this was different was it was on tape. And everybody saw it. And I don't understand, if you was looking at the same tape I was looking at, how you could find these men innocent, right? That was the problem. And the people just kind of lost their mind, right? I remember asking my grandmother, because my grandmother lived about a block away from where the riots kind of started. My mother called her. My mother called her and was like, hey, why don't you come stay with us? Because we lived a little bit further out. We lived maybe 15, 20 minutes out. Why don't you come stay with us? My grandmother said, baby, that's how old black people talk. Baby, until there's tanks coming down this street, I ain't going nowhere. I was like, grandma's a G. She is a gangster. That is the most gangster thing I ever heard in my life. Until there's tanks coming down this street, Grandma? Tanks? Had to do a little homework. She's referring to the Watts riots, which happened in the 60s. And in the Watts riots, they brought in the National Guard. So there was tanks going down the streets of LA to try to stop this thing, right? Now, which kind of made her even a gangster again, because I'm like, you done lived through 2 riots. Dang, right? 2 riots, 30 years apart. 60s and 90s. Then we just had some more riots, didn't we? 30 years apart. Interesting. Anyway, so Grandma was like, I'm not going nowhere. So I started thinking, let me do a little bit of research. And when I did a little research, you got to remember, this kind of a big deal for like a 12-year-old to be willing to do some research, right? And the research wasn't Google, because it didn't exist. I had to go to like an actual library, right? Where there was like books. You could Google a library, see what that looked like, right? So I had to go to an actual library, and I found some of Dr. King's messages and speeches, because I knew he was around during the Watts riot. So I was like, I wanted to see what he said. Maybe it could help me understand how I felt, right? And what he said was this. He said he couldn't condemn the actions of the citizens of Watts without also condemning the situation that made this city a powder keg that was just kind of, or a powder keg that was just waiting to explode. So he was like, I can't talk about one without talking about the other. Then he also said this. Of course, he has a stance on nonviolence. I don't condone rioting, but I understand it. And he said it was the language of the unheard. And I think that phrase punched me in the jaw. The language of the unheard. Because I feel like everybody knows exactly how it feels when you're not being listened to, right? If you know any other human being, right, anytime, ever, right? Especially if you have like all the feels for one of those human beings, all the feels, right? You got all the feels for one of them human beings, you know exactly what it feels like when that person not listening to you. Don't get quiet on me. You know what I'm talking about, how frustrating that is. You know how frustrating you talking to somebody you know they're not listening to you, right? The whole, tell you what, they giving you one of these faces. You know what that face is? That's the, I'm gonna let you finish what you're saying, but I'm finna burn you with what I'm telling you. It's finna be lit. I'm about to light you up with what I've been thinking. You know what that means to me? That means you ain't been listening to what I'm saying. You just thinking about what you gonna say the whole time, right? That's very frustrating. You know what I'm saying? It's frustrating you talking to somebody. Why you not? Listen, my wife, she's the most beautiful human being on the planet. Quote me, right? I'm just, there's no other person breathing more important to me. But sometimes I be like the smell of your hair follicles. Can you just go to Jupiter just for an hour? Just for an hour, can you go to Jupiter, right? You know what I'm saying? And during that time, because I know you're not listening to me right now, because you just thinking about what I'm frustrated in this. You know what people do when you feel like you're not being listened to? You start saying mean stuff. Right? Don't you start saying me? Because I'm just trying to get you to pay attention to me. So you start calling people names. Of course it's wrong. Of course it's wrong. But you're not being listened to. People do crazy stuff. You're not being listened to. So you take that, you blow it up to the systemic, and that's riots. You got a whole city, a whole people group trying to tell you, listen, we're not being treated fairly. If we talking about the 60s, y'all know about redlining? You guys have any idea about redlining? You guys know what I'm talking about when I say redlining? You do. Look at you. She stay woke. Stay woke, sister. You know what I'm saying? You on Black Twitter? I'm just kidding. Put her on, somebody. Put her on. Redlining was a practice in the 60s where they would draw a line when you were doing your city zoning and say that in this residential area, we can't have things that were called unsightly presences, right? So it would be a nuclear reactor, a dump site, a minority family. They make these areas unlivable, and this is called redlining, right? So so our families were considered unsightly. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's like having like a dump site in your city, so we can't live. So this is what's going on right there, right? So he's like, you got people trying to look, this is crazy. Why can't I if I can afford the mortgage, why can't I live here? Oh, well, it's not zoned for you. So you have people peacefully saying, continually. It's like, all right, well, let me just light this building on fire. Maybe you're going to listen to me, right? That's what was going on right there. Of course it's wrong. Of course it's wrong. Why you not listening to me, though? Why you not listening to me? I think this, back to that Ephesians chapter. I love Ephesians for a very particular reason, because I feel like, how do I say this? I feel like Ephesians is written so much like a poetry piece. I know it's not poetry, like, you guys don't shoot me on my hermeneutics here. I know it's not poetry, okay? I'm just saying it's written so much like that because Paul spends, don't shoot me. Paul spends chapters 1 to 3 cocking the hammer back, right? And the hammer cock back is saying, listen, you were brought into the light by Christ, right? The whole first part of that is saying, listen, your salvation was on him. It was on the work of Jesus and his great love for you. And while you were yet enemies, right? So because of this great love, the whole chapter, he's talking about, whole first part, it's talking about all Jesus did. So he's cocking his hammer back. So then when he gets to the later chapters 5 and 6, he says, now husbands, obey your wife, right? Or children, obey your parents. Husbands, you understand what I'm trying to say? I'm tired. Okay. But he's spending all this time cocking this thing back, like children, obey your parents, right? Love your wives like Christ loved the church, right? But the whole time, because he's doing this the whole time, it's like, okay, remember what Christ has done, remember what Christ has done, remember what Christ has done, remember what Christ has done. Okay, now love your wife like Christ loves the church. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, wow, so when I hear that sentence, I can't hear it without the context of the rest of this, right? So when you look at the beginning of chapter 5, he got this whole list of like, these things should not be named among you. Like, no, it's coarse jesting and profane speech, right? And just don't be involved in this. And then so it's this whole list of things that it would be easy to find ourselves kind of swimming in self-righteousness over, right? This whole list of things that he says. And then at the end of that mug, or in verse 8, he goes, and remember you too were once in darkness. You were brought into the light, right? And then he goes back into other things, right, that should be named among us. And I think that one sentence is so telling, right? I sent my daughter to school a few times with little love notes in her lunch, and it says, "Baby, I love you. I'm proud of you. You're gonna kill it at school. Where does toilet paper go?" Question mark. Seems random, right? But that one little sentence tells you an incredible story about my daughter, doesn't it? What do you know about my daughter already? She don't put the toilet paper in the toilet. I think that's crazy. My wife grew up in Mexico. In Mexico, they don't have good plumbing, right? So you can't put toilet paper in the toilet because it's going to clog up the toilet. We live in Long Beach. This is not Mexico. You got to break that practice. I come home from tour like, what is that smell? What's going on right now? Right? Why is there so much toilet paper in the trash can? I don't understand. You blowing your nose that much? Like, we got tissue right there. Why is there so much toilet paper? So I'm trying to retrain my daughter, because when she goes to her grandparents, they're from Mexico City. You go to their grandparents' house. They live in LA now, but they from Mexico City. They just never died. We just put toilet paper in the trash can, right? So her grandmother and grandfather be like, no, baby, mija, no, es basura, right? And I'm like, no. He goes into, it's okay, our plumbing's great now, right? Anyway, That one little sentence says a lot about my daughter, right? Our relationship. I think that one little sentence says a lot about the people of Ephesus. That I had to cock this whole thing back and then line up all these things about what you're supposed to sound and act like, and then say, but remember, you were once in darkness, right? What that means is when you look out that window, man, you just like me. They just like me, right? Here's the point of that. When you look out of your windows, you see marches going down streets of people who feel like they've been treated unfair for a long time, right? You see people on the inside of those windows that feel like, yo, to be honest with you, man, I just don't understand. It's kind of not fair. I would never participate in something like this. Like, I agree, but geez, like, I mean, like, are all white people racist? Like, are you saying all of us? Like, it's kind of not fair. Like, all of us. I know you used to have privilege, but, like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Right? I understand. So, what my encouragement to both of you to be like, listen, you two were once in darkness. We all know what it feels like to not be listened to. And I think if you understand that, like, yo, you know, you two were once in darkness, I think it makes better listeners out of us. And I really think that in a lot of ways, I know in my life, that would have coiled a lot or would have quenched a lot of the hurt I had. Somebody just sit down and listen to me. Like, stop reading statistics about black people. I'm black, ask me. I'll tell you. Like, we're friends. You know what I'm saying? We're friends. Like, you could just ask. You know, it's much better to learn from than to learn about. You can read a million things about people. Just sit down and talk to somebody. You're believers. Right? You know among all people, you're sitting across a table from an image bearer, right? A fractured, broken, seen through a glass dimly version of an image bearer that just has the marks and is the handiwork and craftsmanship of God is sitting across from you, right? In the same darkness that you were brought out of is the same darkness that they need to be brought out of, or they were brought out of. But when that happens, and when we start talking about the people that we actually are, and everything about that person, they past, they present, they future, their ethnicities, their struggles, their pains, their systemic issues, their personal issues, all of that is a part of that person. Right? And you don't need to ignore none of that. You don't need to run away from none of that. Right? It hurts me deeply. People be like, hey, you know what? I kind of just don't see color. And I'm like, well, first of all, you lying, number one. Right? And number two, well, color is actually a very important part of my life. So I'm like, if you say you love me, like, well, I would like you to see color. Like, do I want to come to a barbecue? Like, I'll show you black, you know what I'm saying, right? The point is this. In your zeal and in your hope, in your depth of idealism, seeing that, and especially it's really hard to ignore. The world is not what we were told it was, right? It's really hard to ignore these days. So the death of that idealism, right, and the birth of your revolutionary ideas, right, that you gonna go change the world. All I'm asking of you is when you talking about race, justice, gospel, all of that beautiful goulash of the world that the Lord has allowed you to exist in, please remember you two were once in darkness. And you're talking to an image bearer, right? And when you're talking to an image bearer, you have no choice but grace and love, right? And grace and love makes us incredible listeners, right? And when you're an incredible listener, the person isn't forced to do stupid stuff, right? Because we all do stupid stuff when we're not being listened to. Y'all feel me? Man, I hope that encouraged you in some way. Because I feel like that's kind of how the Lord deals with me. You know what I'm saying? When I think back to my experiences, you know, again, being a black kid in an all-Latino neighborhood had its own issues. And then, you know, issues that were happening nationally and now internationally. You got people like hopping on boats, running to the other side of the Mediterranean, just like, yo, like, this is a crazy world right now. You know what I'm saying? I think that, man, if we could be known for our tenderness, like the scripture says, if we could be known by our love, our grace, our patience for each other, man, what a wonderful testimony. What a great thing you dudes could do. Amen? Amen. Let me pray. Father, I just thank you, Lord, for just the beauty of this wonderful collage of humanity that you created, and how on purpose it is, and how beautiful it is, and how we have a privilege to celebrate and participate in that beauty and in the narrative of redemption. Father, we know that we look forward to the day that you come and make everything right, and you fully actualize our salvation. We know we live in the already but not yet, Father, but in the time that we're still here, Lord, may we be conduits of grace. May we be instruments of mercy and of love, and may we be wonderful listeners, Father God, and that we would see, when we look across the table from somebody, we would see an image bearer. Thank you so much, Father. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.